So this is lesson 7-2, which is the Pythagorean theorem and its converse. Number 1, what is the Pythagorean triple? Give an example with your explanation. So 3 integers that satisfy the equation a squared plus b squared plus c squared are called a Pythagorean triple. Note, remember, integer means it's not a decimal. We're not talking weird square root 7 type numbers. We're talking about, numbers like 5 or 4. The most common example that people will use is 3, 4, and 5, because 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared. Number 2, what does C mean in the Pythagorean theorem? Well, C always represents the longest side of a triangle. In right triangles, this is called the hypotenuse. So do know hypotenuse. When I talk about hypotenuse, I'm talking about the longest side of a right triangle. The other two sides are called legs. So if you are wondering what I'm talking about when I talk about the leg of a triangle, I'm talking about one of the other two sides that's not the longest side. Okay, so those are kind of the new thing. If you are really, really good with the Pythagorean theorem, you'll be able to do most of this. But this first part of the other notes, you might want to at least write down, because it's something that you might not remember even if you did it last year. What's kind of cool about the Pythagorean theorem, other than the fact that you can find missing side lengths of right triangles, which is what it's mainly used for, is you can actually use it backwards to figure out what kind of triangle it is. So this is the other notes. You can classify a triangle as acute, right, or obtuse if you know all 3 side lengths. If a squared plus b squared is greater than c squared, then it is an acute triangle. Like the classic triangle where all 3 of the angles are less than 90 degrees. If a squared plus b squared exactly equals c squared, that's the Pythagorean theorem, which means it's a right triangle. If a squared plus b squared is less than c squared, it's an obtuse triangle, which means it has one really big angle in it. Remember that C, we just talked about this, is the longest side. So let me give you an example of what they're going to give you in your homework, on the test, etc. Example. Classify a triangle with sides of 5, 7, and 8. So notice that this right here has to be C because it's the biggest. The biggest number corresponds to the longest side. It doesn't matter which one you call A and which one you call B. I tend to do it in order. They're just legs, they're the other two sides. So, A squared plus B squared, in this case is 5 squared plus 7 squared. 5 squared is 25, 7 squared is 49. That comes out to 74. C squared would be 8 squared, which comes out to 64. That means 74 is bigger than 64, which means A squared plus B squared is greater than C squared. Looking back up at my chart right here, A squared plus B squared was bigger than C squared. This is an acute triangle. And then I'm just going to do a couple examples here, reminding you how to use Pythagorean theorem in a more traditional manner. Just find the missing side winks. You can tell I'm a little bit tired. Find the missing side lengths. So, example. Remember that Pythagorean theorem can only be used on right triangles. I won't try to trick you, but if you ever go into advanced trigonometry, you'll learn how to find lengths of other random triangles. The most important thing you can realize is that x is the longest side. If x is the longest side, it has to be isolated by itself in the c squared position. It does not matter which order you put the other ones in. So this is 25 plus 49. We just did this. 74 equals x squared. To figure out what x is, we do have to square root. So x equals the square root of 74. I don't have a calculator sitting here, so it's just going to say the square root of 74. If it asks you to round it, you stick it in your calculator. Remember the number or the button right above the enter key. We'll change it back and forth between a reduced radical and a decimal. So last example here for these notes. By the way, my drawings are not to scale. Just be aware of that. Once again, it matters which side is the longest side. 8, that is the longest side. So it's the one that has to go all by itself in the equation. 8 squared. The other two can go in either order. So 6 squared plus x squared. I simplify my squares. 6 squared is 36. 8 squared is 64. I need to get x squared by itself, so I'm going to subtract the 36. When I subtract the 36, I get 28. Once again, I need to square root. X equals the square root of 28. This simplifies to 2 times the square root of 7. Sorry, that's a very horrible 7. Let me fix that. 7. In your calculator, you could also get a decimal. Usually the book says leave it in radical form. This is radical form. Or put it as a decimal and round it to a tenth or a hundredth, right? 1 digit or 2 digits past the decimal. So that's it for 7-2.